Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Marge Britt, founder of Called by Love and Living Loving Legacy. It's all beautiful. It's wonderful. And we have been troubled with technology in the last few minutes, and I am back. Have you ever felt that way, where all of a sudden things seem to dissolve and then you had to sort of take a deep breath, reschedule, reconnect, and say, I am back. And so, hello, world. I am so delighted that we're all here together on this worldwide call, this amazing experience of light and love circling the planet, going around the globe. It is such a good feeling of amazing gift, of union, of oneness, of all of the potentials that are waiting to be revealed. I am so thrilled to have with us today Dr. Tom Murray, who I met only in February of 2019. Had no kind of personal connection with him before that. And Tom and I are going to be talking in dialogue today for a lot of the call, and then opening it for you to come in and share some of where you are. And so what I realize is that for me and for the world, I realize also, the year 2020 has been what some people have called a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It has been the most difficult year, potentially, of our lives, and it is potentially still in future time one that will be the most transformative year in more than 100 years, not only for me, not only for you, but also for the world. In 2020, the universe seemed to say, stop. It showed up in a way that we had not experienced in 100 years, a pandemic. And it changed our lives. We have had to deal with things we never expected to deal with. We've had to open into new ways of doing, new ways of being. How has it impacted you? How has it changed your life? And how will it change your life and even change the world? What I know is that the universe has a plan, and that you are part of it, we are part of it, every single person on this call today is part of it. What I'm aware of as a person who has studied Scripture for many years is that there's a well-known verse that says, without a vision, the people perish. And so there is a vision. It's a vision of hope and a vision of destiny. It's a vision that's being given to you now in the form of glimpses, perhaps in the form of yearning, perhaps in the form of sometimes pain that we don't understand, and we don't even know how to move through it or out of it. Yet it is an invitation also, an invitation for you to be part of something that is still birthing itself. It involves you and your unique purpose. It involves a destiny, a plan of the universe, a plan of spirit, a plan of God, a plan of what I love to call the beloved. And you and I and we and everyone on this planet, if we are open, are being guided step by step even as we wander and as we wonder and as we meander around the planet and around the universe. Actually, not around the planet now, because even this country has been quarantined. This all flows from spirit. It flows from your higher power. It is a plan of love. It is a plan of light. It is a plan that shifts into the higher and deeper and the vaster. It's more than you have ever imagined, and it yearns to direct you and to reveal the way, to arrange the pieces that already exist in the yet invisible and already exist in the yet invisible in your own life. It's known in some realms, some tribes, we might call it, as I am that, always, already. It's known for thousands of years in prophecy and prediction. And how do I know it? Well, I've experienced some of it. And I've seen it work in my own life. In 81 years, I can look back on it and I can identify how it's played, how it's moved, how it's revealed itself, how it continues to reveal itself. And I can know it knows even when I, of my human self, don't know. And so, Tom Murray, one of the things you and I have in common is that we both graduated with doctoral degrees from the University of Massachusetts, the School of Education. And I am so grateful that now we're connecting in another way. My research background from the 1980s is a bit dated, although my dissertation committee wouldn't let me use phenomenology at that point in time. All had to be based on statistical things that could be proved. and what I realize now, many things have changed, and phenomenology is now part of doctoral dissertations. And Tom, I'm so delighted to welcome you onto the call today. And I'm very excited because over the last year and 9 months, or almost 2 years now, February 2019, when we first met, that seems for me a very, very significant intersection in time that I could not have predicted, that I didn't know about ahead of time, and yet it happened anyway. Tom, welcome to our call today.
It's great to be here with you, Marge.
Yeah. And so tell me what you remember about that week that we called Love as Never Before. And the first 5 days were based on the love stages and talking about that. And Terry O'Fallon and Kim Barta were co-teaching with me. They were actually doing more teaching than I was. I find that often as we talk about stages, I love deferring to them because they know more about stages than I do. I'm still learning. And you were there, and you know a lot about stages. And tell me the kind of glimpse moment that you and I, tell people on the call the kind of glimpse moment when you and I first talked about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, well, let me stretch my memory back there, Marge. It was such a wonderful gathering. I was at the second part of it, not the first.
And describe the second part of it.
And it was a gathering of people familiar with Terry's stages model, and we were orienting around trying to, practice and manifest different parts of what she calls the meta-aware tier of being and consciousness. And sometimes, these things have to be taken lightly and playfully, which we did in kind of playing with these concepts and trying to construct a way to be together for 3 or 4 days that was open to love and compassion and paradox and play. It was really quite a fabulous gathering. It was sort of an extended state experience for me. I just love the people that were there. And as you said, I've been working with Terry O'Fallon on and with her stages developmental model for quite a few years now. And I know that when I first found out about it, I've been working in the field of adult development for a while, at least a decade. Before that, I had background in psychology and learning. It's kind of a natural once I discovered the developmental skills. And Terry's, and I number them, and Terry's kind of merged just a decade or so, and really I think some of your listeners have heard her talk about the model, so I don't know how much detail we need to get into it, but it really had features that really kind of put it ahead of sort of at the leading edge of what people are thinking about, and it integrated aspects of other models. So I just fell in love with it and started working with it, doing research with her on the part of it on the psychometric analysis of the validity of the sentence completion assessment that she uses to help people assess and reflect on their stage of development or how they hold stages of development in parts of their life. And so that's part of how I plugged into the stages model. And also I have a background in computer science and artificial intelligence, and I started scheming about ways to put those two parts of my life together. The part that was kind of a nerdy computer stuff and the part that was really interested in consciousness and human potential. And eventually worked with Terry and others to build some artificial intelligence software that automatically scores that sentence completion test. And that test is it's composed of 36 sentence completion items. And you just complete a sentence like the thing I like about myself is blank, or rules are blank. And it takes, it's kind of like, it's called a projective test. It's kind of like a Rorschach test in that there's no right answers and people are just kind of putting out there whatever comes to mind. And because of that sort of projective nature of it, the people who score the assessment and use it are able to get into sort of more of a psychological depth and insight on people, versus just kind of a multiple choice assessment or something where you are trying to solve some kind of dilemma or puzzle and just kind of use your rational mind. So this assessment's been around for many decades. It's been validated, first created by J.M. Levager, extended by Bill Torbert and Suzanne Cook-Reuter, and and it's got a strong sort of psychometric and academic history, and it's quite expensive to use because a human has to be trained for about a year to be able to all these 36 sentence completions to come up with, what they call center of gravity or core developmental level is. So what the technology is us to do is to score these things for quickly and inexpensively. I should be very clear, technology that right now is as accurate as the human scoring. So we've mostly been using it for sort of group and statistical analysis. So if you're have 20 people in a class and you want to see if there's a pre-post difference, or if you're trying to compare kind of the meaning-making sophistication of, say like the employees of two companies when you're trying to do a merger and you're trying to see if their ways of making meaning of the world have sort of different levels of complexity. You can use this to sort of average over numbers of people. So that kind of brings us up to where we met, Marge, and we have a mutual friend, Johnny Thomas, who's now faculty member at University of Colorado. Is that right?
Yes, professor of engineering.
Yes, and his specialty is human resilience, especially in the face of catastrophes and disasters and things like that. And he's been a long time friend and follower of yours. I think he was a member of your congregation when you had
He was in the early 2000s.
Yeah. So, and he happened to be one of my early adopter users for a project that he was working on that had to do with, trying to relate the different ways that people respond resiliently or not resiliently to different situations. He relates that to these developmental theories. So how the level of sort of complexity of thinking and the sort of depth of self-understanding and the ability to say hold many perspectives as you solve a problem, how those factors influence resilience and decision making. So that's his field, and so he was one of my early adopters, and we all happened to be there at this meeting. You knew Johnny, I knew Johnny, and he had told you a little bit about my work, and you got excited about some possible felt in the back of your imagination was whispering to you.
What I realized is that I had been a Unity minister for 30 years, and I had taken all of the deep dives into mysticism and into the scriptures and into mystical awareness of the teachings of from Genesis to Revelation. And I had studied those realms extensively, both east and west. Nisargadatta Maharaj was one of the people that I loved the most, and there's a book of his called I Am That. and then after I'd, at 70 years old, decided to step off of the platform, the bricks and mortar platform at Unity in Tustin, I began sort of wandering around looking for my next tribe. And one of the things that happened to me was I signed up for a course on the web, and it was taught by Brett Thomas. You may know Brett. He's been very active with the Integral Institute. And that ended up leading me to some of the people that were really connected with him, one of which was really connected to a person who had been key in my experience early on in Unity. And he had actually been on the board of a minister's church in Canada. And now here he's showing up again on Brett Thomas's call. And all of a sudden I'm watching the universe bring parts of my life together. And Johnny Thomas, who I knew in the early 2000s, showing up again in my life. And I'm thinking, wow, I was the one that introduced Johnny Thomas to Ken Wilber's writing. And then I met you, and you're talking about a computer-scored inventory. And what I realized is that my connecting with Terry O'Fallon had been unusual. 3 people had asked me if I knew her. And when I finally sort of explored what that could mean, I ended up going to something that she was teaching, and I wanted to take her. I called it a test, and she said, Marge, it's not a test. There's no wrong answers. So I wanted to take her instrument, but it was expensive, several $100s, and taking the courses were more expensive. If you wanted to debrief, it was more expensive. And all of a sudden, you're talking about something that could be done quickly and easily and computer scored and inexpensive. And all of a sudden, I thought, wow, this is something that's never been done before that I knew of, to talk about love in terms of finding out about what love means in our life in all of its faces, not only romance, but in passion and purpose and destiny and things that we're drawn toward that may end up being careers or avocations, maybe just really things that light our fire in other ways. And you're talking about it in a whole new way. And so we had dinner one night at a Greek restaurant, you and I and about 3 or 4 other people. One of them is now on the board of Unity of Tustin, Lisa Kolobar, if you remember her. And I started talking to you about computer-scored possibilities, and both Lisa and her husband had significant positions in companies that used these kinds of computer-scored possibility inventories with their employers. And I thought, wow, we could understand love in ways that no one's ever looked at it. So that led me to the conversation with you and our many conversations since then, that we're now ready to launch a computer-scored version of the Love Stages inventory that I took through the beta phases in its long form, and now it's a short form, 12 stems instead of 36 stems. And so I'm so excited about this, Tom. It feels like a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. All of our lives, in my book, Your Soul's Invisible Codes, I talk about a 1,000-piece puzzle. We have different 1,000-piece puzzles in our lives. But what happens if we find the places where your puzzle and my puzzle have a connecting piece, a link, and other people can link to it, and all of a sudden we get a bigger picture of what the universe looks like, what the world looks like, what our lives look like. Maybe over this entire lifetime, I now look at my life from birth until death. And, I'm not that far from what could potentially be that moment, so I just talk about it in terms of 100 years. That still gives me 19 years to go. I was at Unity in Tustin for 19 years. I know what it's like to be someplace totally devoted to passion and purpose and transformation and union with the beloved for 19 years. It was amazing. And now I have potentially 19 more years to explore those realms in the invisible that's beyond any place that I've ever been before and don't know what it looks like. And I meet you, and you talk about a way to begin. One step, the first step to begin. So say some more, Tom, to what I've just said.
Well, it certainly is a beginning, Marge. There's a lot more we can do with this, and it's exciting to finally. I mean, you have helped our team kind of build out this new software platform that we're launching now. And we still consider it in beta, and we're people who come in and try it. It's free. It'll be free for a while because everybody who uses it is going to be helping us improve it. And what it does, I want to. It's true that the normal modes of interacting and learning about these developmental models can be expensive, but what we're creating is I think an easier entry ramp for people. You certainly don't end up with either the accuracy of the human scored analysis, and you don't have the human crafted advice and debriefing session that comes with the fee that you pay for the usual assessment. But it is an easy entry point, a way to just get people to start thinking about how these concepts of human development and the sort of the paths of consciousness growth relate to their lives, and in particular what we're doing to the theme of love, passion, and care. I'll say a little bit what this thing actually looks like. You log in and it asks you a few demographic questions like your age and education level, because we do want to be doing research with the information that we get in here. And then you answer the 12, you complete this 12 sentence stems. And then you get an automatically generated report. So it does an analysis of the text using the machine learning artificial intelligence software. And it doesn't have, usually, it doesn't have this kind of a margin of error in this analysis. And we don't want people to think that it's going to give them an exact score, because there's too much of a margin of error there to really, ethically say that it's the same as getting a human score. It's not. And so what we do is we give people a range of usually 3 scores. So it'll say you're between these 3 levels, that your assessment falls within these 3 levels. And here's some information about each of these 3 levels and the purpose. And it talks a little bit about how love manifests at that stage, the strengths that come on at that stage, and what it might mean to overuse or underuse the capacities that come on at that stage. So that gives people a report, a document that they can use to reflect on their life and their own journey of of love and connection and compassion. Again, it's not, if people are curious from there, then we point them off to you and your organization and your colleagues, Marge, or to Terry at Stages International and their organization for opportunities to dive in deeper, get some coaching. It's really just kind of an introduction and a taste to this whole field of adult development as it's applied to the theme of love.
What I see is that people misunderstand the word love all of the time. They have their own perception of what it means, and it can be anything from sex to family to loving your job or loving your career or loving the outdoors or loving ice cream. It's not defined really well. We have one word to mean all of the dimensions of love, and even the Greeks had several words. They differentiated between brotherly love, for example, and other kinds of love. And what I see is that my life, every decade of my life, I've had a different kind of love. In my childhood, I had one kind of love, and it gave me a foundation for what would happen next in my life. In my teenage years, puberty set in, and I began to experience different dimensions of love. And then in my 20s, I got married when I was 19, and I had a child. Now I'm knowing motherly love, and it's a completely different dimension of love. In my 30s, after I went through a divorce at the end of my first marriage, in my 30s, I realized I was almost going through my adventure stage again that many people don't do before they do family, because I had kind of missed that in my fundamentalist religious background. And now I was exploring not only what spirit was, I was exploring what relationships were in whole new ways, and experienced total new dimensions of love and total new dimensions of experiencing and expressing union. And then in my 40s, I went into a whole shift. I finished my doctoral degree and thought I had one kind of a goal in my life. And then I experienced the call to ministry, which took me completely out of what could have been an academically related future. And it took me into a deep dive into the cosmos and what is spirit and what does I am that mean in the dimensions of I am that I am, and how does that lead us out of one kind of life into the promised land, for example, and then I spent 3 decades as a minister, and all of a sudden I find myself in another realm, another land, another country called the Internet. And I meet you, Tom, and other people who are on this call. I'm seeing Alon, who's from France and now lives in Portland. And I met him in San Francisco. I mean, it's opened up the world in ways that were way, way beyond. And what I realize is that I've been guided every step of the way. I had no idea where it was going. I could have stopped and landed and sort of built my nest in any one of the realms. A lot of people do. They have their family, and that's about where their nest ends. My nest is not like a nest. It's like the nested dolls, the Russian dolls. that have all of these dimensions that get vaster and vaster, higher and deeper, and it's so exciting to me. But when I met Terry and I took the stages inventory for the very first time, and I was in my mid to late 70s at that time, I found myself on the map. I had taken Suzanne Cook-Greuter's inventory, and it didn't give me that answer in such a clear way. It said, there are so few people here, we don't have much information, period. And I think it gave a few lines of description, and that only left me more curious and a little disappointed because I didn't know where I was going. I was still in this unknown. Stages hasn't given me specific directions for my life. What it's given me is awareness of what is potential in the realms that they talk about, both individual and collective. And it has tiers. And what I've always known, for years, for 30 years in ministry, is there's 12 realms. How do I know that? From Scripture. It's in Scripture. It's meant, the number 7 and the number 12 are mentioned over and over again. I had speculated on it. I'd tried to figure it out. My book is written on that, Your Soul's Invisible Codes. And yet I'd never really seen it put into research. I'd never really seen someone try to understand it in a framework that could be understood in academic language, like you speak so beautifully, Tom, and anyone that is even curious about what that looks like, please use the link in our reminder email and see the issue of Integral Review that Tom was the editor of and a writer of a couple of articles, I think, too. You are brilliant, Tom, in doing the academic language. Brilliant. And I think I have a brilliance that's different. What I love is ordinary language for ordinary and extraordinary people. And that probably goes back to my awareness that Jesus taught in parables. Why? Why not just teach in the highest language, which he obviously would have been familiar with if he was truly an avatar or son of God, as is taught in fundamentalist religions? Or is he a way shower? Was he a human that learned about the divine life and then spoke it in mystery, like all of the words that are in red in some versions of the New Testament in the 4 Gospels? It's so fascinating, and so I approached it in parables. And Terry said to me one time, "You've given me the word that replaces stories for ego stories. It's parables. They can be understood by anyone wherever they are, and they can connect. You can connect with anyone wherever they are, wherever their understanding is, wherever their awareness is." And all of a sudden, on the very last Frontiers course call that we just completed, I had another breakthrough experience in learning from Terry. And she used the word involution on that call for the very first time I've ever heard her speak it in any of her teachings. Involution. And then she said, as you experience this kind of awareness, you are that. And I thought, oh my God. And it was like the universe exploded for me again. And I knew where I was on the map again and what the potentials were. And she talked about how you could move and understand all of the realms. And so I have felt like knowing Terry O'Fallon is in the top 3 of what's been important in my life. So it's amazing.
Well, we have that in common, Marge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel so honored to be working with you and with Terry, and knowing that, we're not doing anything that's the be all to end all. We are doing something that is inviting people into the petri dish to be part of the evidence that begins to tell us a story about what the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years may look like. And here's another dimension, Tom. I think we are going through, cosmically, the end of an age right now. I think by December of this year, we are going to be going through a shift into another astrological cosmic age. And it's been predicted for years. And we're not going to have a mature adult when we step across the line. We're going to have a baby that is just beginning to grow into the new dimension of awareness and consciousness that it's being invited into. Ken Wilber's looked at this, and that he was an inspiration for Terry. I looked at it in completely different ways to begin with, and then I began to see ways to integrate it all. So back to you.
Well, yeah. Well, it's a time of chaos, Marge, and we're in the middle of it, and it definitely takes a certain capacity to stay sane and stay loving and have that vision of possibility that you're talking about. And it does, what these models show us is that they kind of map out in a kind of organized way the different ways that people make meaning of their life in the world. And you talked about how our language is rather impoverished in terms of the word love, and it's certainly the case. I don't know why that is. I have speculated about it a little bit in some papers, but the meaning of the word does change for people as they develop in life. And what's in the ways that you said, and what these assessments show is that the meaning of all the important words that we use, faith and friendship and culture and self, safety, all the important concepts that we use to make meaning of life, they evolve, and they evolve in terms of moving from sort of more concrete and physical ways of understanding things towards more abstract and complicated ways that have many different perspectives and ways of looking at them. And they also evolve from more through phases, as the stages model shows, of more receptive and more active ways of working with these ideas as they change. And one of the things that I love about the stages model and the way that Terry and Kim Barta, her partner in crime and brother in her ventures, describe these things is they're very clear that these stages are not a place you are at. That they are, that we hold all of these levels inside of ourselves. So, that very early part of ourselves where is really about self-love, the ability to stick up for yourself and just orient to what needs are coming up in the moment, and not let go of those. I mean, that's something that we need throughout our lives, and different ones of us are sort of stronger or weaker in that regard. The simple abilities to have kind of a simple brotherly love, or to respect and honor your parents and your teachers. Those are also kind of foundational capacities that we have inside of us that we can continue to develop. And so all of these capacities kind of build on each other. And what they make very clear is that as we build all these capacities up, some of them get hurt or damaged or not nurtured very well along the path. So as we get older and as we mature, there's a need for us to go back and revisit the places where we're a little weak or distorted in the way that we have developed these structures in our psyche. So in this model, one thing I like about it is that it's not just a journey of increasing consciousness and complexity that goes sort of points ever higher and higher into something, but it includes a deep reaching into the depths of the self, and a kind of a constant revisitation and healing and cleaning up, a release of complexity, and an unlearning, as well as the path of learning, so that we become, not just kind of higher and higher, more transcendent, and that can look a lot like a spiritual bypass in some situations, but to continuously reach deeper and deeper into ourselves, to connect with and make as healthy as we can the most fundamental aspects of our being. So I love that about the stages model, and it's part of how we can talk about, the journey of love as well. And in some sense, that the way that the journey of love expands out from kind of the self to the family to your neighborhood and your church to your nation, and eventually you start feeling a kind of compassion and unity with all people, no matter where they're from, and all people, even the ones that you might disagree with, or who are doing nasty things that you think are horrible. You can still find your some sense of connection and compassion for them, and extending out into just a way to sense even nature and all of reality as a part of you. This is also a journey of going deeper and deeper into the self, because what we have at the surface level, it might seem that we're different, but it takes an uncovering, a kind of a personal experience of more and more depth within yourself to understand what you have in common with other people and with everybody. And it takes a reaching even more deeply within the self to kind of experience things like the vibration of life energy and the interconnection of things at an energetic level that make us one with even, the plants and animals and so forth. So I really appreciate and often use this way of looking at development that the Stages model has helped us grasp, which really creates kind of a three-dimensional height and depth picture of what it means to grow up and wake up in the world.
One of the things that I think has been really, really important, even for me in the last 2 or 3 years of my life, is understanding that Terry calls them confusions, but many other people call it trauma, and that it comes up as this vastness begins to unfold. And one of the authors that I've loved has been Richard Rohr, and he has a center in Albuquerque. He's a Franciscan, and he's gone into the far reaches, not always with everyone in the Catholic Church appreciating it even, because they, said things like, well, he's not really a Catholic, that kind of thing. And that seems to happen in the dialogues between the fundamentalists and those that go into a vaster kind of mysticism, I would call it, or a vaster kind of awareness of what spirituality can be. For me, it includes all of it. My family are all still in Colorado and still in the church of my childhood, which was that fundamentalist tribe. And yet I love them totally. And I love another kind of mountaintop that has become part of my awareness at this point in my life. Anyway, this was something I found fascinating in a journal that is from the Center of Action and Contemplation, which is Richard Rohr is the founder of. The late journal is called Oneing, Oneing, and it's about what he calls liminal space. And there was a chapter in it that totally intrigued me called Trauma, Liminal Space, and Beloved Community. I've always loved that phrase, beloved community. I've used it many, many times as part of what I want to create. And this sentence just really blew me away. In our experience, this liminal space will often, if not always, be accompanied by trauma. Wow. Therefore, a willingness to face trauma that carried by others as well as our own is necessary to realize the transformative promise of beloved community. And that just blew me away when I read it, because I have worked with spiritual communities for over 30 years. And what I see in the setting that I've devoted much of my life to is that there is a huge, huge need to understand this kind of shift that goes right along with this opening into liminal space that involves oneness, oneing, Richard Rohr calls it. And I talked to Terry about that one time, and one of the things she said to me is, well, it would take some kind of instrument that could measure where people are. And you know what I thought of, Tom, immediately? Oh, my God, that's what Tom and I are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps. I mean, it's actually on my sort of bucket list of things that I would like to accomplish is to work on assessments and tools that help groups and organizations with collective trauma to help reflect on those things. I think that's the leading of our field, a number of fields, and I think what needs to happen in the writing I've been doing most recently, I sent you a draft of this, Marge, is that we need to find a deeper marriage between the field of adult development, which we've been talking about, and the fields that have been springing up, doing deep research on things like trauma and recovery and addiction, and various modes of healing. And that what is called for are models that understand that both learning and complexity and transcendence, kind of in the ascending direction, need to be supplemented with modalities of unlearning and releasing complexity and embodiment and involution, kind of going back. And that's, you talked about how trauma comes up in these kinds of situations, and I think it's inevitable because there's no way to escape all the doors that we close off in the process of growing up, all the kinds of ways that we separate ourselves, and we have or separate things within ourselves, and we have to do that. We have to survive in society. You have to separate yourself from your parents. You have to understand the difference between your friends and those who aren't your friends. You have to, even at an earlier level, understand that you have a body and that there's a boundary between your body and the world, and a boundary between your inside, your imagination, and the outside, your perceptions. All of these things are sort of splits and boundaries that we really need to make to be able to grow up. But every time we create one of these splits, we also we create a kind of limitation inside ourselves that eventually needs to be revisited if we are going to become more fully whole integrated, because the splits that create sort of conceptual worlds of us versus them, or good versus bad, or Republican versus Democrat. They don't really. There's simple tools to describe a complex world, and they're as much wrong as they are right. And so, as we grow, the pain, the sort of deep suffering that we create whenever we create these splits bothers us more and more, and we're called to better understand and integrate that which was split. And again, there's no way to avoid the way these things inside us. So
I heard some crackling on the line. Are you still there, Tom? I'm wondering. Am I gone?
Okay, Marge?
Are you still hearing me?
What's that?
Says, yeah. All right. Are you there, Tom?
I am.
All right. Technology is doing its thing, but isn't that the way life works? Life gives us surprises.
You have to roll with it.
Yeah. And you have to be in the flow of it. It's like the ocean and the wave. You have to learn how to ride the waves, and you have to take the deep dives when the wave covers you, you know. And so one of the things that I would like to do is to let people ask some questions. But one of the ways that we often do that is to go into a period of maybe 3 minutes of silence and let people jot down what is downloading. What's the yearning that's coming into your heart? What is your deepest heart's yearning? What are you called to explore? What is your next adventure into the unknowing? How is your being called to go into the far reaches, and into things that you may not have ever even experienced before, but gotten glimpses of, maybe through surprises or unexpected experiences, and yet you know there's something beyond. And how does it all work together? I mean, I think about, I see my friend Ed on the call, and Ed and I knew each other in Kansas City when I was in my 30s. And Lewis and Clark, at that very point, right there in Kansas City, it was the jumping off place to explore the Louisiana Purchase. Right there. And they came up the river, and they thought, there was more river ahead, and they thought canoes were probably the way that they would go about it. The President of the United States had commissioned them to explore the Louisiana Purchase, which had never been mapped, and they said yes to that invitation. Never been mapped before. And as they went up with their canoes, they suddenly found out that the canoes were not going to work. They were running out of rivers, as they had expected the rivers to take them to the Pacific. And that wasn't happening. What they were finding instead were mountains. And so there was a whole book called Canoeing the Mountains. They had to leave the canoes behind in order to traverse the mountains and to move into mapping. And ultimately, they split up, and different people mapped different parts of the territory because they realized that one person couldn't do it all. They had to rely on people who were already there that knew nothing about even who they were or who the president was. The Native Americans that knew the territories that they lived in, and they had to rely on them to give them guidance about pieces of the territories. So what are you yearning to map in your life? What have you wondered about? And how might you be part of a bigger vastness that is a potential for the next 100 years, beyond your lifetime even, but still in the remaining years of your lifetime? You have a unique part to play, just as Lewis and Clark did. No longer living, not embodied any longer, and yet here I am telling their story many years later. Who will tell your story many years later? Who will tell the story of how love guided you? And what does love look like in your life? So I would love for us to begin to just maybe go into 1 minute of silence. We usually do 3, but let's do just 1. And really let the universe download a question or a response, words, phrases that might be uniquely you, and in the silence, and then we'll come back to share from the silence. 1 minute. And tell people how to raise their hands.
Hello, everyone. This is Melanie, and
Hey,
I'm
Melanie.
so grateful to be on. Hey, Marge. It's just so nice to be back on the call with everyone and doing well after COVID-19. Took a while. But to raise your hand to be able to speak to Tom and Marge, press *2 on your keypad. If you're attending via the webcast, simply type your comment in the box on that page, click the submit button. Those will be read on your behalf and responded to by Marge and Tom. Thank you.
Oh, so good to hear your voice, Melanie. And on another call, we'll let you talk about your journey through COVID-19. Anyone want to raise their hand? So I'd love to hear from people asking a question of Tom, of me, or sharing what your own glimpse is of what your own heart is yearning for. And while we're waiting for people to raise their hands and let us know that you're ready to speak, what I will do is tell you what I'm feeling. I am feeling this deep yearning to be part of a group, a tribe that includes all the tribe, to be part of an active, collaborative, a team that yearns to understand what it means to live in the all that is, to dance all of the colors of the rainbow, to transcend and include. Find out how we work together, how we love each other, instead of seeing through the eyes of separation or even hate. That's what I'm yearning for. And I'm hearing a bit of an echo, so let's let someone else speak. Who would be willing? Tom?
Yeah. I'm trying to tune
What is your yearning?
For here. My yearning. Well, my yearning that I've been connecting with lately is to find a place of complete acceptance within myself. And gosh, Marge, I'm struggling to put it into words. But as I get older, I see things dropping away, and increasingly the beauty of what is in front of me, and yearn to orient more and more to that which is presented in every moment. So it's I guess that journey into accepting the present and seeing it for its full depth and beauty. Yeah.
You know, what I'm noticing for myself is that I'm not setting goals anymore. Everything is flex flow and open, and I can feel sometimes the yearning to engage with the yearning, you know? And it's very interesting. Often I will wake in the morning realizing that I'm in this liminal space, maybe coming out of a dream where I've gotten a glimpse of something, and I just allow that to tell me, teach me, invite me into what I will do this day, not this month, not this year, this day. What's the top 3 things that this beloved energy wants me to do this day? And it's a very fascinating way to live. I've been a bit of achiever in my life. First of all, it gave me a doctoral degree, and then it helped me build Unity of Tustin. That kind of achiever energy has totally shifted for me. It's shifted into a willingness to embrace, to include, and allow the transcending piece of it to be revelation instead of me figuring it out with my human mind. Allow it to drop in, download in an involution process rather than an evolution process. Very different way of living. Very different way of being in the world. And absolutely a perfect choice in this time of the pandemic, where the universe has said, stay in place. And yet, as I even watch things like my inbox, I see interesting pieces come in across the screen, pieces that indicate transformation and paradigm shift and the beyond that I can't see individually yet, but is beginning to invite me collectively to be part of it. And I think that somehow for me, or I'm aware somehow for me, that is another experience of beloved community. One of the things I love about the stages are the repeating patterns, and how those patterns repeat themselves in each of the tiers, and ultimately will probably repeat themselves in tiers beyond even where the research goes. And one of the things, and I go all the way back to Don Beck, when I first was beginning to experience some of this wild possibility. And I read an article by him in a magazine that's no longer in existence. It was called What is Enlightenment? And he wrote an article on the spiral and spiral dynamics. And I read it, and I was fascinated by it. Fascination is one of the things that is an attractor. Curiosity is an attractor. I immediately said to someone on the team at Unity in Tustin, get in touch with him. We need to bring him to Unity of Tustin to teach. And we did. And he came and he taught the spiral. One of the things I remember most of all was that safety and security was absolutely essential for each of the tiers, and that it would repeat itself. He only found what he called 2 tiers and talked about the quantum leap. Terry has found 3 tiers. What I'm seeing is involution and evolution happening, even in her research. I'm seeing the need for safety and security in our physical lives. I'm sitting in the room where I have spent most of my time for the last 6 months. I can look out the window and see the flowers and the trees, but I have not gone out a lot. I'm in this experience of stay in place because of the COVID-19. What I realize is that there's other dimensions of safety and security. When I was in my 30s and going through my new entry into levels of awareness that were beyond what I'd known in my teens and 20s and childhood, I needed safety and security then, even as I explored dimensions that I'd never even imagined, like coming to the University of Massachusetts, commuting from Long Island to New York to Amherst, Massachusetts for a year, once a week, commuting. How did that happen? And now I'm feeling a need for safety and security as I go into the dimensions that some people have called the causal realms. Terry calls it the meta-aware. Other people have called it other things. Safety and security coming up again. I need to know where I'm safe.
Yeah. Yeah, those lower levels of our being are the foundations, aren't they, Marge? It's so easy to skip past them, kind of assume that they're taken care of, but we have to reach ever deeper inside of ourselves to find the safety and security that is always there. It's like a place that we know. It doesn't even have to be like a truce, like are you safe and secure or not. It's more like a place that you need to have access to inside yourself as a resource. The same with feelings of love and connection. whether or not it's appropriate to bring those resources out at any given moment is one question, but we don't want to lose access to them. And we can reach ever deeper into ourselves to find resources of love and connection and acceptance that don't depend on what's going on in the outside, so that we can become stable sources of those things for ourselves and for others. And it's the same with all of the foundational capacities. You know, you mentioned curiosity and creativity. Those are all things that you see in children. And I think healing and drawing on and deepening those resources is really what we're called for in this day.
So we're nearing the end of the time when our time is going to be up. And what I want you to speak to, just very briefly, is the issue of privacy if anyone decides to take this Love Stages quick score, and speak to how they can get in touch and what our next steps are, and when they'll hear from us potentially about whether they want to be in that group of the beta phase, the early adapters. So just tell us about privacy and that, and then we'll go toward our closing, which ends with Liebestrom.
Sure. Thanks for bringing that up, March. So when you sign in, it will ask for your email and some other, as we said, demographic kind of information like your age and education. And we do want to use the information for research and to improve what we're doing. But that information will always be confidential and private. So, and there is actually kind of a terms of service text there that you can read when you log in. It's everybody's in terms of any kind of research or reporting. Your exact text is not going to show up anywhere, and you have a unique ID number, and your name will never be used. So that's kind of how we're going forward with this. And I also wanted to mention, in addition to the way that we're using this just to give individuals a taste of this developmental perspective on love, we're also looking for communities and organizations where we can kind of do a scan of an entire group and engage in a conversation about how these developmental ideas can help them think about where they're at and how to address the problems that they're facing.
That's so beautiful. And we did get one question that came in from the webcast. It's from Scott. Simple question. The word, what is involution? And I won't go into answering that at length, Scott, but I'll just give it to you shorthand in a language you will understand, because you and I have had a conversation, so I'll know you'll understand this. It's exactly what Teresa of Avila experienced when she was writing about the mansions, and she was experiencing all of the levels simultaneously, knew how to guide the nuns in her community through them. And Carolyn Mace has written about her work and put it into contemporary language, and so that's involution, Tom. It doesn't come from the bottom up; it comes from the top down. And I mean Scott, and Scott, I'll send you an email. And I'm going to say something that this will apply to probably everyone that is on the call. the universe brings us together because the universe has a plan. We don't even know what the plan is usually. The universe knows that each of us has unique gifts that are part of what it needs in order that this plan that it has can be co-created. I'm not talking about Marge's plan or Tom's plan. I'm talking about the universe's plan. Or some would call it Spirit's plan or God's plan. Some would call it the plan of the higher power. So, Scott, you and I met in a very interesting way on a call that was from the Institute of Noetic Science. And I put something in the chat, and you responded to it, and as a result, we've made a connection. I know that you potentially are being invited by the universe to be part of whatever is to emerge in this work. And what I will also say is that as I look down on my computer screen and I just quickly scan some of the names that I see there, every single name that I see, I could have a telephone call with each one of you and say, oh, I think it could be possibly this. It all is related to your unique gifts. Scott, yours happens to be in AI, artificial intelligence, in a way, but definitely with coding. Mine happens to be in mysticism. Right now, I can look at Ed's name. He has a unique gift in the realm of the political arena. He's worked in it for years, member of a central committee. I can go right down the list and I can see all of the ways that the universe is calling you to this next level that is about harmony and beauty. And the amazing crisis, trauma of separation and hate dissolving into a simplicity that is like a baby being born and nurtured by family that loves it. And so, thank you so much, Tom, for being with us today. And as we move toward our closing, we always close our calls with something that I used to play on the harp in my childhood, teenage years, Liebestraum by Franz Liszt, Dream of Love. It's a dream that's been intentional.